Welcome to Neon Cobra. Let's kick into it. I just want to provide a little bit of kind of thoughts and feedback around the Ignite announcements from last week. So I've kind of let the dust settle, and there's tremendous amount of documentation and kind of just industry thoughts. So I'm not going to provide anything too technical, and I'm going to try to keep it focused on more of the Azure changes, right? It was a very AI heavy, as you can expect, right? Covering things from like Copilot business announcements, new language models, M365 Copilot control panes, and it's all really, really cool stuff. Now, there are certain things that I feel did fly under the radar, and respectfully, sometimes it's not new and flashy, but a couple of items that kind of jumped out for me that I'd like to talk about. And I'll provide all the Microsoft news links in the bottom here. So this won't really be a technical deep dive. Big ones, Microsoft Foundry improvements, right? Including the security and management around agents. Copilot Studio has been a really big kind of push lately. We've been seeing a lot of really cool stuff come from that, but it's almost the Wild West at a certain point, like understanding what your users are doing and creating as far as agent wise and potentially who's interfacing with that. And just seeing kind of the landscape can be very difficult. So these improvements, and it seems to stream across, your Foundry deployments as well as your Copilot deployments. So any sort of agents that are being created, you can kind of have a central dashboard for that. So early announcements, interesting to see what that kind of looks like. The big one that kind of caught my eye was Azure Copilot. So I'm trying to even remember if I did a video on this, like when it came out 2 years ago, but it was essentially a glorified chatbot, right? You would ask it questions and it wasn't really able to do much in the environment. And essentially it was just referencing documentation it could easily find, right? So when rubber meets the road and you're trying to say like, well, I need help optimizing the environment. I need help doing this, and be like, here's the Learn article. Good luck, right? The proposed changes and the things that we're going to see come from this could very well change how people use the platform, right? One of the biggest problems I find a lot of people with navigating Azure is just understanding Azure, right? What virtual machines do I use? Why is it performing bad? What's happening? And even digging into metrics and finding like IO flatlining and stuff, unless you know exactly where you're looking, can be a little cumbersome for your first few deployments. So if they deliver on what they're talking about, and Azure Copilot actually gets a lot of kind of roots into the Azure tenant to be able to draw information and make contextual decisions and changes now, that could be a really big push, right? It's not going to get rid of your solutions architects. It's not going to get rid of your design and architects, but it's going to be able to make some recommendations beyond the Azure advisor. So I'm really interested to see how it can improve the overall experience with the aggregated data it has available to it. So some other additional things, we're seeing some additional network throughput improvements, right? I think it was somewhere around like 200 gigabits per second or something. So seeing these improvements come down the line and hopefully trickle down to virtual machines can affect a lot of things like your Azure files, your FS logics, just even how your virtual machines interface with the attached disks, right? So really excited to see that sort of bottleneck widened, and we'll see hopefully some better performance down the line. And a really interesting one that is more CSP centric is the marketplace being globally available. So if you're not aware, this was generally something kind of restricted to ISVs and large enterprise that had certain accreditations to be able to publish software and their own deployments as agents onto the Azure marketplace, right? This is where you'll see things like Nerdio Manager for MSP as an example. Now, CSP, so working as an MSP, you were very limited. In fact, there was like CSP offerings that you really couldn't leverage to kind of create your own options. So with the advent of agents, and similar to what Pax8 is doing with their agent marketplace, Microsoft has created this ability to host your own applications, your own agents, and your own deployments, potentially even your own service plans, right? And just contractual agreements and easy onboarding scripts and things like that in the marketplace. Now, there's more information to be found on this one. We'll likely see it develop over time, how you go into it. I haven't had a chance to dive in, but contextually, this might be very similar to the Azure private offers you've been able to create in the past, where you can kind of create your onboarding or your Lighthouse legacy script and then just deliver it via the Azure marketplace. So we'll be really interested to see how this kind of changes things out. Whether it'll be able to make waves in the MSP space will be, will take time to find out. With Microsoft, everything tends to be enterprise first, MSP second. So it'll be interesting to see how this goes through and whether it just becomes a bunch of white noise out there or whether some cream rises to the top. So some really cool things kind of came out. Obviously, there's the Azure AVD local stuff as well. There's been some amazing kind of comments on this online, so I won't dive too much into it. but I'm hoping to be able to get my hands on it someday. So maybe I'll spin up a lab somewhere and see how that functions. But overall, some very interesting things that are not necessarily AI related that might be coming down and may change the way you interface with your clients. So I'd like to open a dialogue on this. Let me know what you guys think, maybe what you were most excited about. Maybe I interpreted some of these things wrong, right? It's a lot of information to aggregate over a short period of time. I'll leave it to smarter people than I to do that. But this is kind of what caught my eye. So with that, we'll catch you next time.